Richard Siegler, two-time champion of the LVO, only two-time champion of the LVO. Do you use that to lord it over the other members of the Art of War house?
No, I would never do
No,
that.
you're too nice to go
They're
for
all
that.
accomplished players. So.
Right. Can you tell me which of the wins matters more, means more? Do you have one that ranks higher? Because they were really different situations for you.
Yeah. The second time matters a lot more to me. The first time, the game was fundamentally broken, with Iron Hands dominating the meta, and John and I basically came up with the best version of the Iron Hands build and was able to win a bunch of mirror matches and end up taking it. But I didn't feel super accomplished. Obviously, I was playing against a bunch of other broken Marine builds. But with winning with AdMech after they've been nerfed multiple times and nobody expected AdMech to do well, that showed player skill. So that's the one I most treasure.
When you're going into an event like the LVO, realistic goal setting, do you shoot for top 8? Like, does anybody really go in and say, my goal is to win? Obviously, your goal is to win, but realistic goal setting, is top 8 really about as good as you can say you want to do, and then from there it's just, look, let's see who we're facing and what's going on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, top 8 is already an amazing achievement because these tournaments have become enormous. They're like 800-person tournaments. To get the matchup, kind of the matchups that you want over the course of the event, and then actually get in, usually you have to play a shadow round. So that's a seventh round. You're playing up until like midnight, and then you have another game at like 8 a.m. So it's not great on your sleep schedule, and there's a lot of pressure for a lot of people. So when I went for the second time, there was no pressure on me. It was like, I just have to do the best that I can. I'm going to get a probably decent score regardless, and I'm in contention to win the ITC with only 6 events. That's awesome by itself.
Do you think in the current meta, and keeping in mind that Arcs of Omen is not being used for the LVO, so given the balance of the game at the LVO and the balance of the armies, do you think there is play in taking something like an army that other people are not going to be used to, or is it just it's a pretty open field for all the top kind of armies?
I mean, there's definitely value in taking an army that people don't have a ton of reps into. Everybody's going to be prepared for the couple Tyranid builds that are dominant or the couple Harlequin builds that are dominant. But not a lot of people are going to be prepared for some off the wall, janky type of mid tier army that you usually don't face, maybe like an Eric Lathuris GSC style list. So the thing is, you play against a certain army, once, easy to make mistakes. Second time, less so, and then third and so on. Most people don't have 3+ reps against particular army lists, especially if they're kind of the more niche factions. So that first time, anything can happen. There's very obvious mistakes that you can make, and then you realize, all right, well, I'm never doing anything like that again. Or maybe you just play it completely wrong. You play it too aggressively, play it too conservatively, and you just lose on points. So that type of stuff is what you learn with reps. And by and large, there's a lot of people in the game who are going to be competing for LVO and don't have 3+ reps against certain lists. So there is value into it, but at the same time, you probably, to win, if your goal is to win the LVO, you need to play the most consistent army that's going to give you the best chance against the most competitors.
What about, and by the time people see this, all the list building is done. People are at the LVO and they're ready to kind of roll some dice. But what about the idea of the current strongest army versus an army that you know really well when you're going into any tournament?
I mean, I've won tons of games with underpowered armies or just like meme armies against stronger ones, so it's completely possible. It's very difficult, and you have to play perfectly. But I think there's something there. Player skill really does matter, especially at the top tables, and it's just one shot. It's not double elimination, nothing like that. So all you get is that one chance to beat the army. So if I just pull out a combo you haven't seen with, the Adeptus Mechanicus, all of a sudden you're like, well, next time I play against this, I won't make this, but I guess I lost.
Right. I'm kind of thinking for someone like me, or even your top tier, mid tier, whatever it is. If you're going into an event, how do you see the balance of when you're making that decision about your army, the balance of that I want to take something really strong right now versus an
Mhm.
army that you're really familiar with, you know all the rules. It might still be a pretty good army, but I'm not saying take a bottom tier, but when you're making that decision, uh, how do you see the balance of those two factors? The army that's strong right now versus the army that a player might know super well.
Yeah, I think if you clone somebody and they took their favorite army they're super well practiced with, and they took the army that was just the most popular and the quote unquote strongest at the time, they would almost certainly do better with the one they're practiced with,
Right.
even though it's a less powerful book.
Yeah. You know the stratagems, you know the janky rules, you know the bits and pieces, the movement, and you know how many dice to roll to get rid of a unit, or all the little things, right? All the little tricks. So what are you expecting to see
Exactly.
do well at the LVO this year? Is it what or who, actually? Is it
Aaron,
player or army for you?
it's probably player first.
Yeah.
I think there's probably like 6 to 8 names that realistically I would not be surprised if they won it. Outside of that, the armies, I do expect Tyranids to do well. I expect Harlequins to do well. They are the two strongest armies in the game, but going second against a scary Tau list on some of these LVO terrain boards, you could just lose games. So I honestly expect there to be quite a bit of upsets because the middle of the meta is very volatile in that they have really good matchups into certain armies and really poor ones into others. So because of that, if you just happen to hit the good matchups or you happen to hit some bad matchups as a top player, you could get knocked out early or you could just cruise into the top 8.
Right. And how do you think the terrain is going to play for people coming from overseas? You've got these people coming from the UK, some pretty good names coming from the UK and Europe who want to have a go at the LVO, want to have their shot at the title. Um, how do you think the
I
terrain's
believe
going to
some good
play?
players from Australia too.
Yeah.
Um, I think they're going to do well. I mean, there's all the top players are all roughly equivalent with each other. I don't think there's people who are dramatically above the others. So it just comes down to the amount of reps they've had with the army and how comfortable they are playing on this type of terrain. Now, LVO terrain, like you mentioned, uh, some of the terrain boards are a little bit sparse, and so you can kind of suffer a lot of crippling damage early against fast armies, fast mobile shooting. I expect that to excel. Reserve heavy armies are pretty good on this format as well, if they have access to that. So I definitely expect to see some shooting armies do very well. That's kind of why I took AdMech last time, is because the firing angles you can set up with player place terrain are immaculate.
Are you going to be keeping an eye on the LVO? Are you going to be around Vegas? I know you're not playing, but are you going to be around and watching, or just keep an eye from a distance?
I'll probably be watching the stream, honestly. I just enjoy watching some of the top games. So hopefully there's some good matchups on
Yeah,
there,
nice.
some good commentary, hopefully.
Oh, there will be some great commentary. We love the commentators. Um, all right, give me a prediction. Who you picking? Like, if I put a gun to your head and pushed you into the corner and said you've got to pick one name that will win this.
John Lennon's Tyranids.
Okay, great. Richard, thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Always good to see you.